In the military, you're given a uniform and instructed on how to do things and when to do them. But what happens when the cadence fades and you're no longer wearing that uniform? I'm KP, and I started this podcast to fill that silence with direction and to provide overall support for my beloved military family. Welcome to the Morning Formation. This episode is brought to you by Act Now Education. Thank you for joining us today, folks. The Ultimate Fighting Championship, Bellator MMA, and many other organizations have a stage in the shape of an octagon where warriors live, eat, and breathe the sport known as mixed martial arts. Behind the scenes, a group of judges sit in a dimly lit area front and center of the action. The backstory of one of those judges, Mr. Cardo Urso, includes an impressive military career, holds over 5 martial art black belts, and is known as a subject matter expert in combatives. Today, I'm honored to have retired Master Gunnery Sargent Cardo Urso on the show. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thank you, Kale.
Cardo, so I want to start from the beginning. Where are you originally from, and what was your childhood like?
I was born in 1958 in a place called Rutland, Vermont. My father used to build oil refineries, so we moved around quite a bit. Probably within 7 or 8 months after my birth, I had moved to Venezuela. And that's where my name Cardo comes from. It was actually Richard at one point, and then when we moved to Venezuela, our maid would call me Cardo, short for Ricardo. That name stuck, and when I got back in the States back in 1976 or so, I had it legally changed back to Cardo. My old man moved around a lot. We did. By the time I graduated high school, I had lived in 41 states and 4 foreign countries.
Wow, that's so you grew up as a military brat, and then you ended up joining the military. And so at what point did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
Well, not quite a military brat. My old man was a World War II vet, but he got out of the Army back in 46. And like I said, then he started building oil refineries and pipelines. So the question again was what again? I'm sorry.
At what point did you decide to join the Marines?
Okay, good question. And I graduated high school and I had a scholarship for wrestling. I went for a semester and I failed horribly everything I took. The only thing I was successful in was wrestling. And when I went back home for Christmas break, I knew I was not going to go back to college. So a buddy of mine and I decided to join the military. At that point, the only service that I was interested in was the Marine Corps. Like I said, my father had served in the Army in World War II, fought in the South Pacific, and fought alongside Marines. So when I decided to join the Marine Corps, he was very excited that I was going to join the Marines and absolutely supported me in every way.
Wow, so can you take us back to when you signed up and sort of the progression of your career while you were in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, sure. I signed up initially right out of high school before I went to college. I was going to be an MP, and the MP field was closed, so I wasn't able to join then. We were going to ship a couple months later, but then I decided to go to college. I did that for 3 months, went back and joined the Marine Corps, and I joined as an artilleryman, fire direction control. I started martial arts in 1971, and when I went into the Marine Corps, continued to train in different martial arts. Reason so many black belts is back then it was very difficult to find a style that you were doing in different places. So, like if you New York, I was doing a system called Shukokai. When I got to Camp Lejeune, Shukokai was not available, and I had to do different styles of martial arts.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask. That's really interesting in itself. The Marine Corps, back when you first joined up, what type of combatives were they actually doing, and how did that play a role with your Marine career?
Well, the Marine Corps really didn't have any true combatives when I joined. There was a very loose, close combat program, but really it evolved around pugil sticks. When I went to Paris Island, the only real combatives we did were pugil sticks. And then when I hit the fleet, there were FMs, field manuals on close combat, but there was nothing really taught consistently.
So, I understand at one point you were a drill instructor. Can you talk us a little bit about what that time was like, and some of the things that you had to go through to become a drill instructor, and what was it like to have trained Marines back in those days?
Well, I joined the Marine Corps in 1978. In 1980, I went back to Paris Island as a corporal. Uh, my two drill instructors were actually there. Two of the three drill instructors are still there. And went through DI school. I had a ball. I loved it. It was awesome. I was 21 years old, being put in charge of training 74 recruits and being responsible for their basic training as a basically trained Marine. Um, Little side note is I also met my wife there in the PX when I was going through DI school. Her dad was a senior chief in the Navy, and we ended up getting married there at Paris Island about 2 years later at the Depot Chapel. Um, I was a drill instructor for 4 platoons, and then went out and took over at the water survival section. I had been a water survival instructor in the Marine Corps, and went out there and trained privates how to swim. And I did. It was a 2 year tour, and I ended up doing 3.5 years because with the skill set that I had as a water survival instructor was a critical skill set that they needed. So I stuck around for a few extra years.
Wow, yeah, I know, definitely. I was stationed in Hawaii at one point, and the water survival was a big deal out there. You get a lot of folks that were from landlocked areas of the United States who would get stationed in Hawaii, go out to the beach for the first time, and try to hit the waves on North Shore, and end up quickly discovering what riptides are about. And so I could see why that I could see why
Absolutely.
that would be a huge necessity for training. So, can you talk to us a little bit about your martial arts background specifically, and when did you undergo the training and achieve the belts that you achieved?
Well, like I said, in 1971, I saw a movie called The Five Fingers of Death. It was an old kung fu movie. And I watched those guys flying around and doing all this stuff. And I was like, man, I want to learn that. And of course, not realizing that that was theatrics. I didn't realize that at the time. And there was a small dojo in Rutland, Vermont. It was a Wichiru dojo, and I went there, and it was completely different than what I had seen on TV or on the movies. But it bit me. I really enjoyed doing it. And like I said, we moved about every year. So the next year we moved from Rutland, Vermont to Glens Falls or South Glens Falls, New York, and started doing a system called Shukokai, which was a Japanese system, and also did a little judo at that time with my first instructor, a guy named Paul Fracchia. Um, High school, I wrestled. I boxed in high school, played football, and ran track. So it was kind of a mixed bag of nuts. But the martial arts was something I did consistently. So I got my black belt in 1977. Went into the Marine Corps in 1978, and continued to train. Like I said, um, I have a bunch of different black belts in different martial arts, but again, not because I wanted to be a Budo butterfly. But the bottom line was you had to, if you wanted to train, you were probably going to train in something different every 2 to 3 years because you were going to move. And where you were going to go, unless it was something like judo, which was a standardized thing, it was very difficult to find consistency with martial arts. Um, Trained in Okinawa with Skichi Odo over there, another guy named Seiki Toma, and Uehara, Skichi Uehara. Trained with those guys there. Really kind of honored to be able to do that, particularly because they were all in their mid 70s, and Uehara was 99 when he ended up dying. And I was lucky enough to be able to participate with his group at the World Karate Tournament back in 2002.
Now, would you mind just listing out all the belts that you've achieved over the years and what a little bit about what that martial art involves?
Well, I'll probably miss a few, but the first one was Shukokai, which was a derivative of Shitoru, which was developed by a guy named Kenawa Mabuni. Shitoru had a lot of katas, probably 60 katas or so. Tani, who developed Shukokai from it, uh, pared the katas down and made it very sport oriented. It was very sport oriented. Um, that was my first black belt. Then I got a black belt in a system called Tadashi Do from Paul Fracchia, where I continued to train. Uh, Also got a black belt in Okinawa Kempo, Ryukyu Hon Kempo, two systems of Kobu Jutsu with Odo in those two systems. I got a USJA. I'm a judo black belt. I'm third degree black belt in judo. Been that for, I don't know, 20 years or so. A 6th degree black belt in combat sambo. 8th degree black belt in Matsukaze Aru Jiu-Jitsu. 3rd degree black belt in Goshi Budo Jiu-Jitsu. Um, Boy, I'm going to forget some others, but again, just not because I was trying to just get a different black belts, but I just wanted to keep training. And unfortunately, every time you went somewhere, you had to start training in a different
Yeah,
system.
I completely understand that. I haven't been in the military myself. Every 3, 4 years, 5 years or so, you got to get up and move and go somewhere else and adapt to your surroundings. Now, when you started on this chain of achieving these belts, did you ever feel like the last martial art that you trained or a previous martial art that you trained helped you with the current one that you were working at?
Well, they're all, when you're talking about karate systems, right? There's punching, kicking, and sweeps and throws, I guess. Um, so they're pretty much going to be similar. When you're talking about judo or jujitsu or sambo, throwing and grappling, they're going to be similar also. Um, so once you learned one stand-up striking art, the next one was kind of easier to learn. And the same with the grappling. Once you learned judo or jujitsu was much easier to learn because the techniques tended to be the same. There's only so many ways you can bend an arm or a leg or strangle somebody.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And for anyone out there listening, if they're looking into getting started out in a martial art, do you have any suggestions for them?
Yeah, what I would suggest is um, look around and try different things out. Again, um, like now judo is very difficult to do because I'm close to 63 and I have a lot of injuries. So judo is very difficult for me to do. I really can't do it anymore. I can teach it, but I can't do it. um, where, like I said, for the last, well, when I hit 40, I started doing Tai Chi and Qigong, and that stuff I'll be able to do into my 70s and 80s. So I would say, try different martial arts out, see which one fits you best, and I think that's the one thing that the martial artists, the Okinawans, were a little different than the Japanese, where the Japanese kind of had a cookie cutter approach where you were supposed to fit into the system, where the Okinawans years ago used to train people individually on strengths and weaknesses. So that's what I would say is find what you what you want to do, what you like doing, and pursue that. Because the bottom line is, if you like it, you'll be more. apt to pursue it and actually put time into it.
Yeah, you were truly one of the folks early on who understood mixed martial arts. I mean, just based off your background and all the levels of degrees that you achieved in those different martial arts, would you mind bringing it back to the Marines and applying these martial arts to what you did in the Marine Corps, and talk about the initiation and the setup of the MCMAP system that's being used today?
Sure. The martial arts, the mix of martial arts, and I think we knew about it back in the 70s, maybe even before that. But the mixture of martial arts, like I said, I did judo, and I knew that judo didn't have a lot of striking. There was striking in judo, but it was in the katas, goshin, jitsu, and things like that. Then if you did karate, there wasn't there might be some throws or some sweeps, but there wasn't any groundwork. There was no submissions, nothing like that. And I had gone through a karate tournament in 1974, and I had not thrown one punch. And my father asked me why I didn't punch. And I said I didn't like the way karate punched with the traditional straight punch. And he said, learn to box. So I think even back then, guys who were really training kind of realized that in order for us to progress and become complete fighters, you had to kind of do different things. You had to do some type of grappling. You had to do some type of striking. You had to do some type of stuff that would have throws and things like that. And that's how we evolved, how I evolved in doing this stuff. Um, in 1997, let me go back. I was a battalion operations chief in 3rd Battalion, 10th Marines in 1992. And in 1993, I had heard that there was a new close combat program coming out in the Marine Corps. And I had the opportunity to go through the instructor course on that as a gunnery sergeant. And I believe at the time I was probably one of the more senior guys to ever go through that program. It was called the line system of close combat, which meant linear infighting neural override engagement. And that system was the first system that in my career we had for the Marine Corps. It was truly a system that was repeatable and taught as a system. It was a good system. There wasn't anything wrong with it. It was limited because how much time and effort are you going to put into anything? And so it was what it was. It was a good system. The amount of time that they gave them guys to do it was adequate. In 1995, I think it was, I left the operations chief 310 and went to work at our staff academy teaching our staff sergeants in the career course, and I went into the gunnies at the advanced course. And while I was there, I got approached by Training and Education Command at Quantico to go sit in on a course content review on close combat for the Marine Corps. So we had 10 subject matter experts, guys like Bill Hayes, George Nobles, Hunter Armstrong, George Bristol, Ron Don Vito, Bob Casper, Kelly McCann, Lieutenant Colonel Humphreys, and a gentleman by the name of, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Jack Hoban. And these guys were different martial artists. Ron Donvino was the developer of Line. I was one of his instructors. I had a background in judo and karate. George Bristol trained with Hunter Armstrong in a traditional Japanese weapons system. Bill Hayes was a Shurin-Ryu guy. George Nobles was a Sambo and Judo Taekwondo guy. Bob Casper was an internationally recognized knife and combatives expert. Kelly McCann was basically the same thing. By the way, those two guys were also, everybody was a former Marine that I know of. And we sat down to develop the new program. Now, why did the new program exist? The commandant at the Marine Corps at the time was a guy named General Krulak. And Krulak had a vision of the Marine Corps with a new mission, and he called it a 3-block war. And what he was saying is that first block is humanitarian relief. I'm handing out MREs to refugees. The second block, they start getting excited because there's no more food and they riot. Well, a 3-round burst to the chest probably isn't the answer for that. We needed a way of controlling them in that scenario. And then that third block was all out combat that we were really good at doing in the Marine Corps at the time, anyway. So we were looking to go from basically non lethal to lethal force. And so line didn't do that. Line always led to death. It was a close combat program, and that's where that was. So between the 10 SMEs, we started to put together different programs from non-lethal to lethal force, and that's where the new close combat program came into, and that was 1997 to 1999. Then in 1999, we had a change, and maybe before that, it may have been 98. We had a change of a commandant. Krulak retired, and a guy named General Jones came in. And General Jones started saying that he wanted to teach martial arts. So we had just developed this new close combat program. Close combat could be considered a martial art. And so I went to our boss and I said, "Hey, we're teaching martial arts. You know, the commandant, somebody should let him know." And at the time, it wasn't high on priority, and that word never got to the commandant. Well, he came out again and said, "I want to teach martial arts." And again, we tried to get that word to him, and it never got to him. The third time he came out in writing, said, "I want to teach martial arts, and I have a subject matter expert in Aikido who's going to help us get Aikido dojos on every Marine Corps base." And at that point, my boss at the basic school uh, saw a target of opportunity and got the commandants here. And I was sitting in my office, which was basically a broom closet at the basic school, and I got a phone call from the CO's secretary saying, "Hey, Master Sergeant, the commandant's here and he wants to see you." And I said, I thought he was pulling my leg. And he goes, "No, the commandant's here and he wants to see you." So I ran all the way up and got to the CO's office, and sure enough,
Wow.
General Jones was there. And he invited me in, and we sat down, and he said, "Let me explain why I want to teach martial arts." And he goes, "I didn't even know we had a program." So he said that when he was a company commander in Vietnam, the ROC Marines were on his flank, and the ROC Marines did not seem to get attacked by the North Vietnamese as much, and he thought it was because they were all black belts in Taekwondo. Now, whether that was true or false,
Right.
that was the perception. And he says, "I want that perception for my Marine Corps." And at that point, he said, "I want that perception so bad, I'm going to change the utility uniform you're in." I was in a set of Woodlands. And he goes, "For us to say wear the same utilities as the rest of the armed forces is a breach of our culture." So at that point, we had basically in a foot race with this civilian who was going to teach Aikido, and the commandant gave us an opportunity to go out and actually compete against him, and whoever had the best product would win the approval of what he wanted. So we went out and we did a test out in California. We were there for 5 weeks at Camp Pendleton. We trained an infantry company. We got the staff NCOs, and
There's you. Oh,
is that you
that's
or
me.
me?
Sorry.
Okay. We got the staff NCOs and officers up the brown belt in the new system. We got the corporals and sergeants up to green belt, and the troops we got up to gray belt. The new program, the commandant wanted, something I should mention too, had 3 areas of discipline. It had the physical, the mental, and the character. Okay, so basically, this goes back to traditional martial arts, where I'm not developing a warrior beast, but I'm developing a warrior defender, someone who has the ethics to be able to know when and when not do
Right.
good or bad
Wow.
things.
So it's not just about training the physicality part of it, but it was also training the mental side of things as well. Which,
The mental and the character, and the character being the premier portion of it. The character portion, having somebody who knows the right thing and the wrong thing to do and choosing the right thing. That was the biggest thing. Then the mental aspect of it is how do I enter in and actually have to use lethal force? And how do I prepare myself mentally to go out and have to possibly kill another human being? And then more importantly than that, how do I make sure that I'm going to be okay after that, psychologically? And the physical aspect of it is the really truly the least the least important out of all the three.
right, right, all around. So when you implemented the new program, can you talk to us a little bit about how that was perceived and how that was uh, received by the Marine Corps as a whole? And have you kept up with the evolution of the Marine Corps martial art program?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because it was a commandant driven program. So when something is a commandant driven program, you don't get a whole lot of pushback on it. Um, maybe a little grumbling here and there. You had guys who didn't. The Marine Corps has always had great martial artists. We've always had guys, but there's a lot of guys who don't do it. And now you had a program that was being implemented that you kind of had to do. Um, uh, when I retired from the Marine Corps, I went to work for another federal agency as a subject matter expert in defensive tactics and combatives. And when I left the Marine Corps martial arts program, I left it. Um, they didn't need the old master gunny hanging over, looking over their shoulder, saying, "No, that's the wrong wrist lock. It's supposed to be like that." Um, a few years ago, they reached out to me. I went down and was a guest speaker for their graduation, and told them about a little bit of the history of how the program had started and evolved because it had been 18 years. Um, this late August and on the 1st of September, I'll be going back down to the Mace to observe their training and then also to be guest speaker for their graduation. So, again, one door shuts, the other door opens. I just retired from the federal side after 19 years, and now I'm being brought back into the Marine Corps martial arts in the capacity of a black belt emeritus.
It's amazing how you based almost your entire career just strictly on the martial arts that you trained and loved growing up. And my hat's off to you for that.
Well, one thing about that KO is you got to remember, I did it and trained in it, but it wasn't until 1997 that it actually became full time. From 1978 to 1997, I was a Marine first and foremost. I was an artilleryman by MOS. I was a drill instructor, water survival instructor, and a I&I staff training reserves. So for the first 17, 18 years in the Marine Corps, I wasn't a martial artist first and foremost. I was a Marine, then artillery guy, and then whatever else the Marine Corps told me they wanted me to be. I was just lucky that eventually the Marine Corps said, "Hey, you have a background in this stuff, and we'd like your expertise in this area."
Now, I will say this because I'm a huge proponent, especially people who are in service, of continuing education. And with that being said, that's something that you did through martial arts. Um, I'm sure that martial arts helped you out with that free time that you had as well, doing something positive over something that like most young service members would do. And in a sense, you used martial arts to continue your education and invest in yourself. But at the end of your career, it ended up paying off.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's one of the things that the commandant, General Jones, when he was talking about martial arts, what he wanted was he wanted something that Marines would pursue after hours and on weekends that would reinforce core values. So I mean, think about it. Where do we get our problems with our young troops on Fridays, Saturdays,
Friday
and Sundays
nights.
when they're away
Hmm.
from the and they're out doing things that young men and women do, and they get in trouble. So what he wanted was somebody that would say, "Hey, we got this martial art. You can do it Saturdays and Sundays. You can do it after hours, and the instructor would be there to reinforce those core values of honor, courage, and commitment." And that's exactly what he was looking for.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's true leadership in itself. Is finding a positive method to get young soldiers or young Marines to do something positive over the as they say, the wandering mind of a young adult. So now, when you transitioned out, I understand that you worked for a federal agency for an additional 19 years. And just to add to your credentials, you also published several books on martial arts. Is that right?
No, no, you know how my writing is. Hey, I don't know where the apostrophe or the comma go. No, actually, back in the late 90s, um, a buddy of mine had a friend who worked for Paladin Press, which is now gone. And I was approached by Paladin to do a couple of different videos, and I did a video on kata bunkai, or the forms of katas for martial arts and their applications. And then I did one on what we call pressure point jujitsu, which used the acupuncture cavities and grappling to make your grappling more effective. So I am published, but they were two videos, no book. I'm still waiting to work on that.
Okay, because I did recall seeing a cover of you wearing
Uh,
the gi and
that was Black Belt Magazine, and they did an article on me.
okay, okay, cool. And so you transitioned out and you worked for the federal agency, but I also understand that you got involved in mixed martial arts judging. Can you take us back to the beginning of how that started and the evolution of that?
Sure. Interesting thing. Back in the late '90s, um, MMA, actually, it was 1993, UFC came about, and that just floored us all as traditional martial artists. We saw where we had weaknesses, although some of us had been knowing it for years. There wasn't a way of really integrating it, but we saw it starting to get integrated into this mixed martial arts. And if you think back to the 1997, 98, 99 in MMA, it was kind of trying to break out of whatever it was going to be. And unfortunately, back then, a lot of the athletes who were competing did not fit those core values of honor, courage, and commitment that the Marine Corps was actually looking to reinforce with our martial arts. I actually had a sergeant of mine at the Marine Corps Martial Arts Center of Excellence who competed in an MMA event and asked me if I would help him. And I wouldn't do it because, again, the MMA at that point was not, it didn't hold with our core values. And I just thought I'd be a hypocrite if I did. When I retired from the Marine Corps and went to work for this agency, um, uh, I was doing a judo club, and we were doing a grappling competition on Naga. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And Kip Kohler got on the intercom and asked if anybody knew how to bracket. Now, being an old wrestler and being a boxing guy, I knew how to bracket. So I said, "Yeah, I can bracket." And he said, "Well, would you help me out?" So I helped him bracket the weights and the classifications. And then he asked me if I would help him run a ring. And I said yes. And we worked all day. And that night they were doing an MMA show. It was Kip's, right next door to where the grappling tournament had gone. So Kip invited us to go to the fights. So I went over to the fights, and I was with a retired warrant officer buddy of mine, and he goes, "Dude, you got to come meet this guy. He works for the commissioner, and he knows who you are. He'd like to meet you. He's a Marine."
Mm.
So I went up and we introduced ourselves, and he said, "Yeah, I've heard of the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program." I told him who I was working with this federal agency, and he said, "Have you ever thought about coming to work with us?" And I said, "Well, I already got a job." He says, "No, no, no. As a part time, I'm making an inspector." So I became an inspector for the state athletic control board, and I watched guys wrap hands, boxing and MMA. And as I sat down and watched the MMA progress from being this kind of Wild West tough guy competition, they were really trying to make it a legitimate sport. I mean, really, really trying to make it legitimate. And my opinion started changing. Now, this had to be 2002, 2003. And my son and I were training, and my son decided he wanted to get involved with MMA, and we started a club. I met Pat Miletich, and we went out and became an affiliate at Miletich Fighting System with Pat, and just started training in MMA. And I did a lot of judging for the state, and then went international. Did a lot of judging internationally, and like I said, really liked where MMA had gone as far as the character of it.
Yeah, and so early on, can you tell us some of the different organizations that you worked for judging MMA, and then also some of the greatest fights that you had ever witnessed or been a part of judging?
Well, actually, I don't work for any certain organization. I work for the state athletic control boards. So what happens is uh, you'll get they'll get in touch with you. The state athletic control board or the ABC will get in touch with you, and you do that. So I've judged UFC's, Bellator's, Strikeforce. Yeah, I judged a lot of different ones. And as far as the best fights I've ever seen, it's really hard to tell. I know I was in Madison Square Garden at the first MMA show they ever did. I was judging that one. I know Conor McGregor was on that fight. I think I judged his fight. I know afterwards in New York City, um, the crowd was so loud you couldn't sleep. In the hotel, it was just unbelievable. But I mean, I've been very fortunate to be in MMA as an official, um, um, just after the beginning, just after it actually started. Um,
So, what
yeah.
were some of the states that you actually judged in?
Well, I've been to Birmingham, England, once. I went to Canada 3 times. I went to Mexico 3 times. I went to Brazil 4 times. I've judged in Arizona, Oklahoma, North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, yeah,
Yeah.
a bunch of different places. I'm kind of slowing down now, and that and kind of by design, you just get to a point where, uh, you know, uh, uh, the travel is it gets a little
Yeah.
old, but
It's
as
it's
well
it's
you
it's
know.
amazing that you also traveled internationally. I didn't realize that you were in Birmingham in Mexico. Actually, I did know that you were in Mexico. I remember you telling me a story about that one specifically. Um, but I guess my number one question is, and this is kind of near and dear to my heart because I was stationed, deployed there actually, was can you talk to us about your trip to Mosul, Iraq, when you went over there on an MMA tour?
Yeah, it was really interesting. My wife, I don't know if it was on Facebook or whatever, but she had found a woman, and I can't remember her name, and she was a lieutenant colonel's wife, and she was trying to put together a show to entertain the troops in Iraq. So my wife reached out to her and told her that, I'm a retired master gunny, and I was a judge for multiple different states, and judged at the higher levels of MMA, and that I'd be interested in participating in that. And um, at the time, I want to say it was Georgia that sanctioned the events. Um, and they brought me on, and they brought my daughter on also as a Marine Corps girl. We flew to Kuwait and then into Mosul. Um, we were there for, I want to say, a week, and we did the show. The show was outside. It was incredibly hot, as you know. It was one of the now you say it. That was probably the best show I ever did, out of all of the shows I've ever done. When I sit down and actually think about it, uh, probably the best show. And there was probably 10 amateurs and 3 pro fights, uh, but it was absolutely a great experience. Um, give you an example. We were all in a compound together on Mosul, and those concrete sea hooches they have, where if you're getting mortared, you go underneath those outside
I know those very.
your
I know those very well.
little. So they were all over, and we got done with the fight. We had been up. I mean, it'd been all day. It was miserable, hot, and my daughter and I and a couple of the other officials were there, and we looked down at the end of the compound, and almost all the fighters were either soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen. I think they had a couple of contractors who fought, and then they had a couple of pros, but the amateurs were all soldiers and military. And at the end of the compound, that's where those guys were stationed, or sleeping. They were berthed down there, and there was kind of commotion going around. So my daughter and we all walked down there, and these soldiers are gearing up. Now they had just fought 2-3 hours beforehand, and they're getting all their equipment on. They got their flak jackets, their helmets, they got their TO weapons, and I said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "Well, we're going back to our units." And I said, "Tonight, after the fight?" And I said, "Yeah, we knew we had to go, so yeah, we're going back to our units tonight." Now, my daughter, who had been a Marine Corps girl with multiple organizations, she turned to me and she said, "Pop, if they were back in the States, they'd be going to the after party." And I said, "Yeah, them going out to protect us, that's their after party." And that was one thing you said before about the warriors inside the cage. I don't believe those guys are warriors. The real warriors are the guys who are over there, who were in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea, and Europe and the South Pacific. Those were the real warriors.
Yeah, no doubt. Definitely putting your name on the dotted line and signing up for the military is something that's a heavy responsibility that many people don't do. And I agree with you 100% on that. And what year was that you were in Mosul?
Oh gosh, uh, you know what? I'm guessing. I should know this, but I really don't. I would imagine it was 12 years ago. I'm guessing. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I was there in '04, '05. So I
It,
think
it was
you
it was
came.
after that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's while I was in Mosul myself, it was really nice to have like USO come in. I think we had Toby Keith. We had a couple of rock bands come in. It was a nice break from service and actually to get your mind off things. So I really appreciate you volunteering to do that because it would have been pretty awesome if I could have seen an MMA fight while I was in Iraq. But definitely when you're over there, it's every night go outside the wire type thing, and it, I'm sure that the troops highly appreciated putting on that show. You've had quite an amazing career, Cardo. Everything from joining the Marine Corps to your martial arts background, and all the folks that you've trained in the federal service. You've affected so many lives in a positive manner. You ever often sit back and think about the career that you've had and all the folks that you've had the opportunity to link up with and connect with?
No, I don't think about that, buddy. I'm just a guy who got lucky. I mean, that's the reality. There were a whole bunch of other guys out there who if they had had the opportunity, could have done the same thing. So for me, I mean, I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. And like I said, there was a hundred or 1,000 other guys with the same stuff. Um, and no, I don't think about it yet. Like I said, once one thing shuts, I look on to the next thing that's on the horizon. I really don't dwell too much on the past.
Well, I can tell you this much, that it's an absolute honor to have you in my network, and it was an absolute honor to have worked with you over the years and to know who you are today, because you definitely had a positive influence on my life, and I can't thank you enough for that. You're truly like family to me, Cardo, and I just want to say thank you, because I'm sure that you affected many lives throughout your career, and I'm one of them. So before we close out the podcast today, do you have anything else that you'd like to tell the listeners out there?
No, man. Hey, just find what your passion is and try to do it and do the best you can. And you'll succeed at some things and some things you won't. And the old serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two.
Yeah. I tell you what, you are a true master. I miss working with you. I miss working with you immensely, and I'm just very fortunate to have gotten an opportunity to work with you. And I appreciate everything that you've given me. I mean, when we worked together, you literally gave me the keys to your gym and let me train and teach jujitsu, in the gym, one day a week, and that was my savior at that time. So I really appreciate you and everything that you've done. And for anyone else, anyone out there listening, you guys look on the side of the cage next time you're watching a UFC or a Bellator fight. You might see Cardo sitting there judging. Many times he's in the zone, focused on what the fighters are doing. He's probably one of the few judges that actually knows what's going on when the fight hits the ground, because of his background in mixed martial arts, as you could tell from today's interview. So look for him on there, and I'll put some links on the show notes as well on some things that show how many fights he's actually judged and what was the outcome of those fights. I know they keep those metrics online too. So, Cardo, thank you for your time today. I appreciate you putting time aside and giving me your attention and the interview. Thank you so much.
Hold on, Teo. I think that's what you do, right?
That's right. Shaka, brother.
I don't know what that is,
Hang
but
loose.
I'm doing it.
Hang loose. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much. Thank
All
you,
right,
everyone.
buddy.
Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. For the morning formation, this is KP with Cardo, and we're out.
See you.